Welcome to the next episode of The Lair. I am your host, Dr. Daniel Ford. And recently in The Lair, I've been thinking about solar energy. If you're going to live off the grid, what better resource than a continued source of energy than from the sun? But I think it's a little bit more challenging than just saying I'm going to get into solar. So joining me today, my guest, Luke Olinyk from Harvest Solar, who was also one of my classmates at the best university in the world, University of Michigan, it's Ross Business School. Luke, welcome.
Hey, thank you, Dan. I appreciate you having me. I am.
Did I say your last name right?
Yeah. Close enough, Dan. It's all good. It's a complicated one. And the spelling of my last name actually changed through Ellis Island 100 years ago. So, not even real now. So it's fine.
That's great. So, I appreciate you coming on and talking about solar. You're a part of a family business over at Harvest Solar in Michigan. How long have you been in the solar energy business?
Sure. So my background is engineering, mainly mechanical. I graduated from grad school at Michigan mechanical engineering back in 2005, and then got into software. I really didn't feel like getting into automotive, and that's kind of where all right, you get dumped out of University of Michigan or Kettering, and you have a mechanical engineering degree, like the natural path would be, let's get into automotive. And I really wasn't interested, and at the time there weren't a ton of jobs available. So I got into software, actually, DoD contracting. We wrote software as a company locally in Ann Arbor that it writes the simulations for the missiles for the F-16 and the F-18 pilots. So it tells them if they have a shot or not, which is kind of cool. So I did that for 4 years. Sat in a cube, wrote code, old code. It was more physics and math and engineering than it was software, but it was in software format, And then 2010 came around, and my dad approached me, my dad, Mark, who was an EMBA 11, by the way. And we actually got some love from Dean DeRue on the commencement that we are a father-son kind of through the EMBA program thing. So that was nice. So anyways, yeah. So back in 2010, my dad had been toying around with this idea of distributed wind technology, like wind turbines. And the idea was there are these, 1 meter diameter wind turbines that you can scale, much like you can scale solar panels. And they had an investor, they had an inventor, and he was sort of the businessman making them talk together and proceed with their business plan. Well, it unfortunately fell apart. Still a great idea, but I believe then we kind of pivoted into farmers and agriculture that need 10 or 20 or 30 kilowatts of wind, of a wind turbine. So like personal use kind of stuff. We had procured a wind turbine in from Ireland. We got one in from Germany, German engineering. Hey, let's order our wind turbines from Germany. This is going to be great, right? Because I got Beamer and all those other companies that are just German engineering. So it turns out that wind is very high on the maintenance side of things after you implement the project. So you have moving parts, you have fluids to make the axles move and things like that. You have blades that crack over time. You have brakes that need to be retuned and things like that. So it was just very expensive. And the cost of steel, the cost of copper, the cost of aluminum, all of those metals, continue to go up, not down. So we're like, all right, well, continuing through with this, wind turbine business model, the hard costs are not going to move. They're moving up. Labor's moving up. Copper's moving up. And so in 2012 or 13, we pivoted into solar energy. And the cost of solar since the year 2000 or something like that has been reduced by like 80%. So it's just substantially lower cost. Not necessarily that the technology has gotten that much better in the last 20 years. It's just that the cost with the volume of solar being produced around the world, the hard costs have come down so much that it can almost stand on its own as an energy option here in the United States. So we've been doing that for 7 or 8 years now, Harvest Solar. We were Harvest Energy Solutions. We switched the company name. We're laser focused on solar now. And we've been installing residential, farmers, businesses, and we're actually getting into some utility scale, like building solar farms currently. So it's been fun, and it's just sort of like one of those, like, all right, there's so much going on. Where do you focus? We've been really fortunate to be so busy especially through this pandemic. So, which has been an interesting year for everybody. But yeah, that's kind of the short of the story.
Nice. So let's talk a little bit about the costs, because there are a lot of people that think the costs associated with implementing solar for your home is very high. And we learned a lot of techniques, explicitly, net present value, to determine whether or not it's even worth the investment. So if I wanted to do solar today, I want to put it in the house, a house that's 3,000 square feet. When is that going to pay for itself? How much do you think? How much is the initial? What would the investment kind of be like? And should I sell stuff back to the grid?
Right. So a couple of things to consider. So there's all these different segments that we're selling in right now. Residential is obviously one of the main one that we get the most interest in, because people are just like, they're seeing solar panels around. They're like, oh, maybe I could put solar in my house, and do I need a battery, and how many solar panels do I need, and all that kind of stuff. And that's exactly what we do. We analyze and design those systems for folks, and we have to give them a price on it, right? So the average, I would say, here in Michigan, we have Consumers Energy and we have DTE Energy, two of the biggest utilities in the state. They have these policies. They are actually, through the Public Service Commission, they're regulated, so they have to accommodate the solar need or want in the marketplace per the instruction of the Public Service Commission. So they can't just go off and say, nope, sorry, you can't. If I'm a DTE customer here in Ann Arbor, DTE can't tell me I can't put solar panels on. They're actually, by law, required to allow me to put solar panels on, use some of my own energy, and then maybe even put some back on the grid if I'm overproducing at that time. So the cost, it's anywhere from, for residential, it's going to be anywhere from $2.50 to $4 per watt, and that's how we talk in the industry. Everything's per watt, right? It's like selling a car and saying, how much is that car per horsepower? It's essentially what you're saying. It's like the wattage of a solar panel is what that solar panel can put out in optimal conditions. So my house, for instance, in Ann Arbor, it's 2,400 square feet. Our energy bills are $150 a month. And I just know, based on the installation of the solar and here in Michigan on an annual basis, I'll probably need around, 10 or 15 kilowatts of solar, which is 10 or 15,000 watts of solar. So if I were to then get a calculator out and say, all right, if it's just for simple round numbers, 10,000 watts of solar multiplied by $3 a watt, that would be a $30,000 investment. So it's a $30,000 investment to have it, that's full service turnkey installed, and you'll have it hooked up to the grid and everything else, and you'll have a savings every month. So the goal with that would be, all right, $30,000 a bet. That's a lot of money, right? It's like buying a car. It's a big decision, and that's kind of the first thing people like. They see the sticker shock of how much solar actually costs, because I think historically, you see 1 or 2 or 3 solar panels on a roof. They're like, oh yeah, that'll be a couple $100 or something. Like, not quite. So, you have this $30,000 investment. You break it out over the life of the system, which is typically 25, 30 years. And it turns out you have a savings every month, and your break even on that system is, I don't want to speak for, where you live, Dan, but where we live here, it's probably around 12 or 14 years is a break even on, an investment that is not for my business. That's kind of where it gets interesting, is when businesses actually start to invest in solar panels. It's basically, you're buying equipment. You're buying, it's PPE for you're buying equipment that is for your business to help run your business. You're producing energy so you can operate your business. And you now can depreciate that asset over time. So you have that additional bonus in the form of a deduction on your taxes, and you can do it at an accelerated rate. So you can pay your solar off even quicker. In Michigan, with the rates that we have, for a commercial operation, it's more like a 6, 7, 8 year payback than it is a 12, 13, 14 for a residential. And the bigger you go, the bigger system you go, the lower your price per watt is, because you have these hard costs and these soft costs, which your soft costs will come down as you, with the volume of a larger system. being implemented. So that's basically the how it works. And there are these federal tax credits that are offered. So it's like a 30% federal tax credit. It switched to 26% this year. So we are very much at the mercy of some of these incentives in our industry, which is one of the negatives of it. We have a lot of lobbying for, pushing these incentives forward and getting them reintroduced and things like that. If the tax credit were to drop today, the solar industry, I would think, at least for residential and commercial solar, would probably be cut in half as far as how many systems continue to proceed. But I think we're very, very close. We're probably within 5 years of solar being able to stand on its own without those tax credits. So it's working. This whole thing was put in place in 2008, actually under the Bush administration, for these tax credits for solar and wind. And it's been now 12 years of having these incentive programs, and we're getting to the point where we're getting pretty close on not having to have that external factor. Going back to our program, that SWOT analysis, you have like all these external things controlling your business. And the goal is to have as few of these external things, these environmental things impacting your business that you can't control. And that's one of those things. So we're excited for the cost of solar to keep coming down and for the education level of our customers to keep going up, so that, it's just pretty much a no-brainer going forward that solar is going to be a big part of the future.
I think solar is going to be a big part of the future. I mean, it's a natural resource that we do not have to go into the ground at all for. We don't have to do any type of digging. There's no type of drilling. It's just something that we have to develop the technology. I think it's a huge technology play. But when I get this energy from the sun, are people storing it a lot today? You see them investing in batteries?
So you've heard of a company called Tesla, right?
Unfortunately.
So there's Tesla has, they have DC batteries in their cars. And one kind of spin-off product from that technology is the Tesla Powerwall, which is a home storage. It's a home battery basically to store power in. So I guess I could draw on a piece of paper for you. I don't know if it's true in your household, Dan, but if you of the 24 hours through the day, from 12 a.m. to 12 p.m., your curve for solar looks or your curve for your usage looks something like this. So, you're sleeping here midnight, you're waking up around 6 a.m., the house is busy for a while, but then the parents go to work and it dips back down. Then, 6 p.m., 7 p.m., your usage in your house continues to go up. And then you go to sleep at 11 o'clock or whatever it is, and you dip back down. So that's called your energy profile for your house. And solar, I'm going to draw a second line now just to kind of explain how this works. The sun comes out, literally the line that the sun takes in the sky is the amount of kilowatt hours that will be produced by your solar system during the day. And it looks something like that. So it's just a bell curve, right? So you have now, I don't want to get too technical here, Dan, but I know you love technical stuff. So this is above this curve, right? So at high noon, or whatever this is, you're going to have more power coming from your solar panels than you're using in your house. So what happens is you have this excess area here, this area under the curve in between the two, that what are you doing with that power if you're not using it right now? It's either going to the grid or you're storing it in a battery. Now, to answer the question, do you want to store it in a battery, depends on your policy with the utility company. With Consumers Energy, which is the biggest utility in the state, but it's not, I'm on DTE here in Ann Arbor. Consumers Energy has a true net metering policy, which basically means anything you produce in excess in the moment is going to get pushed onto the grid, and your neighbor's going to use it, or their neighbor is going to use it. And you get the same rate for exporting that you get for importing. So if you're paying 14 cents a kilowatt hour, you're going to actually get a credit for 14 cents going out, and then you're going to pay the same going in. On DTE, this is where batteries kind of come into play. On DTE Energy, you can export that power for 7.5 cents, and you buy it for 14. So most people are saying, I'm not selling my kilowatt hour for 7.5 cents to you. I'm going to put it in a battery for later. So that's when you want to get storage. Storage, it serves a couple purposes, Dan. So you have a power outage. So you have an outage situation where you want to get like a day or 2 or 3 days worth of, your critical, what they call the critical loads in the house, like your refrigerator, maybe a couple circuits of your lights, and maybe whatever else you need to just operate at a minimal level in your house for a couple of days if the power goes out. The other reason that you want to get get storage is to store that when you don't want to export and you want to import. Basically, you just want to store that power in your battery in that moment. And some utilities are on what's called the time of use. So the rate will change throughout the day. So maybe you pay 14 cents until 3 o'clock, and then you pay like 26 cents from 3 o'clock on. So given the dynamic of your rate structure, there may be a time where you want to store battery and then sell it when the rate's 26 cents as opposed to sell it when it's 14 cents. So there's games you play there too. There's several reasons as a homeowner you would want to go with a battery solution to help supplement your solar generation. But it's a cool thing. Most of our customers don't care about price. They don't care about most of those things. They just want a battery for whatever reason, whether it's environmental or they have a Tesla, S series and they want to charge it with a Powerwall just to kind of keep it all in the Tesla family. Like it's not so wide and popular yet, at least here in Michigan, that it's, being installed. It's probably being installed on, I don't know, maybe 20% of the systems that are residential in the state are adding a battery right now. Whereas, you go out to California and they have a lot bigger energy issues out there. It's more expensive out there. They're on these time of use rates. The battery makes sense. If you look at that net present value of a system with just solar, given one of those complex rate structures, and then you look at it with solar plus battery or solar plus storage is what we call it, the rate structure significantly changes when you can actually store that power instead of sell it for cheap. And the financial model actually might look better with a battery than it does without it. And that's the complexity of what's happening. And unfortunately, every utility is different with their policies. So it's just, there's no like blanket answer. Yes, battery's good. Yes, battery's not good. Is it a good financial decision? It really takes a little bit of math and kind of some expertise to kind of guide you through that.
So essentially, it's just like what we learned in our MBA program. The answer to every great question is, it depends.
It depends.
In this case. So as you were mentioning this, I started thinking, because, hey, I've got a generator. And I wonder if I was going back at that time before I had a generator, would it make, because I think the generator that I have is actually based on natural gas, would it have made more sense to, instead of having a natural gas generator, but utilizing a battery to just store until I get to say, because I don't know what the exact, I don't ever run out, but I pay as it's being used.
Yeah.
Let's say I only wanted 3 days worth of a battery. I'm like, look, I think no matter what kind of catastrophe that happens and where I live, I believe the power company is going to be able to get me back up in 3 days. So let's just get a battery that can do 3 days worth. I wonder if that would have been cheaper than getting this natural gas unit installed.
Yeah, so we have customers that, they want backup, right? And that generator is an emergency situation type of a device, right? Like that kicks on. You have an unlimited supply though of natural gas. You can just keep paying that as long as your power's out. Unfortunately, with storage of batteries, you only have so many kilowatt hours stored in that battery, and you only have so much daylight. So you can't just say, I need more kilowatt hours right now, son. Can you please give me more? I'll pay for it. There's no option there. So Generac is one. I don't know if Generac's the generator that you have, or if it's Kohler or whatever. Generac just came out with a product basically that is now, they're selling solar inverters, they're selling storage batteries, and they're selling obviously generators because that's the brand they have. And they're actually made in Wisconsin, I think. So they're kind of doing all of the above. They have customers that want to just put a generator in. They have customers that say, all right, like you said, if it's just, I can deal with a couple days of backup from a battery, and anything beyond that, I guess I'm just out of battery. Do I need a generator? Just based on the history of the utility in that area. Like I live here in Ann Arbor. I know that like in my 13 years living in this house, we've never had power outage for more than 24 hours. Unless you're a doomsdayer, obviously you have different motives if you want to be safe and have power completely off the grid in the case of something drastic happening. And we have those customers too. So it really does depend, but you can get all three. I would say, would it be less expensive? No. Your generator is going to be your least expensive option, Dan.
Interesting. But I'm also an environmentalist.
Right.
I feel I have a moral obligation to not take the resources from the earth. Then I might want to invest even more heavily into solar from a backup perspective, because again, I'm not looking to power everything in the house during some type of catastrophe. I'm just looking to power what is needed. So I might do that. All right.
Right. Yep.
So, there's people that say that you live out in the Midwest. Why would you invest in solar? It's only sunny for, 5 months. So you got 7 months of clouds and snow. Why would I want to do that? There's no sun out.
Okay. I can actually show you. I don't want to help you prove your point. I'm going to show you. So my wife and I own a solar. It's a solar farm, but it's a very, very miniaturized solar farm. It's up near Cadillac, Michigan. It's on 3 acres. It's 350 kilowatts. So it's like, I don't know, over 1,000 panels, 1,000 solar panels. And I have this little app on my phone that I can see how much it's making. And it gives me a monthly breakdown of the year. So I can look at last year. And here you say 5 months of sun. I'll just show you the chart. Hold on, sorry. I'm just trying to. So that's monthly, January. Okay, so March actually starts to pick up, and then October really is the last month. So you do have, it's more like eight decent months and 4 really bad months is usually how it works out. And that's not, that's typical. That shape is typical, but for instance, this May was just a record-breaking solar month in Michigan. So everybody was happy about that. So with net metering, you can roll your credits forward. So you can produce kilowatt hours in August or September and use them in December, January, February, depending on your utility policy again. But you can store up those credits, and the utility company will have to let you use those credits. So you can just bank those credits. So as far as like levelizing the load of those kilowatt hours throughout the year, you can actually bank them in your better solar months for later use. But yeah, I think you're
so based on that chart, there was never a time where you weren't getting energy being stored, because even though from what it looks like to me, it may not be sunny outside, but it's really it's the UV rays that matter, right?
Correct. It is the UV rays, and on cloudy days, you can produce half the power on a cloudy day than you can on a sunny day. I mean, it's not like it just completely shuts off when there's clouds. And with the daylight hours changing, I think, was it yesterday was summer solstice, and then you have winter solstice. So like, we have 16-hour days right now versus 8-hour days. So not only do we have clouds and snow in the winter, we have the shorter days. So we really have a lot of things going against us in the wintertime. That's why these net metering policies are so important to our industry, that the utility companies just play ball with, some of these things. And, they want us to pay certain fees to use the grid as storage, which I totally understand. But yeah, it's kind of always a back and forth between the utility companies and the green energy lobbyists for solar of, what are those policies that we set up? Getting back to your point on solar production here in the Midwest. Yes, it is drastically different than Arizona. So in Arizona, your irradiance is, and I'm going to talk watts per meter squared for a second, okay? So that's basically just talking about energy density on an average day out in Arizona is about 1,500 or 1,600 watts per meter squared. Just use that as a metric. It doesn't really matter what it means. Compared to here in Michigan, it's more like maybe 1,200 or 1,300. So it's not double the solar irradiance out in Arizona. It's certainly higher. It might be like 30, 40% higher, but it's hotter there, and heat is inversely proportional with voltage. So the hotter your solar panels are, the lower your output's going to be. So that's one factor that plays into this. Another factor that plays into this is if your utility rates in Arizona is 7 cents per kilowatt hour, 8 cents per kilowatt hour, here in Michigan, we pay 15, 16 cents. So our rate here is double. We're paying double per kilowatt hour from the utility here than a lot of these other areas outside of the Midwest, especially in Michigan. We have some of the highest rates in the country here in Michigan. So you factor all of those things into your calculation, into your spreadsheet, and the solar irradiance, the availability of sunny days here in Michigan is not the only factor contributing to whether this is a good investment or not.
That's interesting. I would have thought, being out on one of the coasts, that they, especially being in California, Nevada, Arizona, I would have thought they would be much higher in terms of their cost, because it costs a lot to keep a house cool. But it seems like to me they're paying much less.
Yeah, and I do think, California, I think Massachusetts is another state where that the rates are high, and they also have a very progressive backing from lobbyists, from people of impact that in the legislature there, the governors and things like that put these policies in place for incentivizing solar. So not only do they have higher costs, but they also, on a state level, they incentivize it. So the state of Illinois is doing it right now, and Ohio has done it in the past even. But I know that Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, California, Colorado might have a little bit of this, but they institute what they call solar renewable energy credits, SRECs, they call them. So like SRECs are traded commodity basically, and you'll probably take some interest in this, Dan, and maybe look into it a little bit on your own time. But SRECs basically it's a megawatt hour of energy that's produced at a certain rate. So an SREC is basically it's given a number, and it's based on the marketplace and what the value is in that time for producing energy. And the state of Illinois will pay your customers for creating what they call SRECs, okay? And it's basically a carbon offset program that is a tax on some of the bigger corporations that do have some of the carbon taxes. They take all that money. Yes, it's government money, but it comes from the companies that are polluting, per se, and it gets redistributed to the folks that are actually producing green energy in the form of these SRECs. So that's one thing that some of these states are doing. Michigan isn't doing that right now, but we have our own sort of incentives here. But yeah, there's things like that can happen as well in the industry.
So if I want to find out what my power company's policies are on solar and being able to store energy and selling it back to the grid, how easy is this for me to find on their website, or how do I go about it?
Yeah, so as soon as you start Googling solar power, you're going to start getting cookies and getting ads thrown at you real quick. But yeah, so your utility company will have a website that's basically a solar net metering or a renewable net metering policy, and they'll basically just walk you through. They'll explain it if they have a policy, what it looks like, and then you can always reach out to like a local installer to help you like dive through exactly what all this means. The tax credits, how do the tax credits work? There's 2 forms that you got to file with your taxes to take advantage of the tax credits, and that's a big reason people do it too. Is these tax credits? It's like, all right, I'm gonna get a loan on this solar investment, and I'm gonna get these tax credits at 26%. 26% of $3,000, you're gonna get what, $7,000-8,000 back, and that's in the form of a check from the IRS for your tax liability. So if you had taxes removed, your income tax basically, if you had income tax removed during tax time, you'll get a check for that $100, which is a nice chunk of change in people's pockets. And it's another driver in our industry. It's like, all right, essentially it's the same for cars. If I buy a electric vehicle, there's tax rebates, or there at least were So you can buy the car, get it fully financed through the dealership or whatever, and then you have a $5,000 tax rebate coming. So that's another game that they play in this industry, is these rebates. So yeah, there's lots of games in this. I kind of want to bring up utility solar. So, and how this works is on a larger scale. So we talked about residential. Commercial really doesn't work any different. It's putting solar panels on your facility to offset your energy bills and create a savings. Utility solar, it gets interesting because now you're going out to like the 5th decimal place of your net present value and your cost. You're really diving into what this thing's going to look like over the course of 30 years. And our company actually, we're not a developer. There are larger developers around the country that basically have a ton of money. Some of these funds are in the billions of dollars, where they're just kind of looking for opportunities to put solar farms in. So they negotiate with utility companies. They'll talk to the local townships, because a lot of the farmers own the land that people want to put these solar farms on. So they have to get buy-in from the community. They have to hire local talent to help install it, just to make the community happy. They have to procure all the materials, which 90% of solar panels around the world come from China. It's very much a Chinese thing. There's also, there's manufacturers in South Korea, Taiwan, a few other countries out there, but China is largely the driver of this market, especially at the price point that we have to implement at. So you have these large utility companies with all these they're pulling all these pieces together, and then you have to have somebody actually do the engineering and install it. That's when they call us, if it's in our geography. So we're getting into a few of those projects right now. But those are the fun ones. You can kind of sit through and look at, all right, initial investment, where can I squeeze some cost out of this project? And that really comes down to that financial net present value calculation that we know so well. Of, all right, 30-year investment, I'm going to have some costs, I'm going to have some replacement parts maybe at year 10. So you plop all those in there, and it's either a thumbs up or a thumbs down on that particular project. And that's how these developers work. But it takes years and years for these projects to develop, as you can imagine, with local zoning ordinances changing, or the property rights to this particular piece of dirt that is near a substation on the utility. The infrastructure of the utility is also a factor. Like, you can't just put a solar farm in the middle of the desert and there's no way to get that power to the city 400 miles away. Like, all of these things have to make sense. And, it's a really interesting thing. And here in Michigan, it's just taken off like wildfire, because the utility companies are wanting to own their own green energy now. It's turning now. They're seeing it as an investment opportunity, because they've been fighting it for years. They're like, this actually is a good investment. So now the utility companies, who we've historically been, doing this with, are the ones that are wanting to put the solar in and have us install it. So it's an interesting dynamic.
What do you think is going to be the next advancement in solar?
I think, storage, we talk about storage and Powerwall, and the Powerwall actually, it for, bang for your buck, it's probably one of the better residential batteries you can put in. And it's you store it like, a gas tank takes gallons. Well, a battery takes kilowatt hours. The Tesla Powerwall is like 13.5 kilowatt hours of storage. And that's a 300-pound unit that sits in the wall in your garage. And, so I think that storage really holds the key for more advancements in technology, and there are a lot of other, lithium iron phosphate, like there's a lot of there's even saltwater batteries that are completely created through non-polluting means. So there's a lot of cool technologies that come out of research, like at U of M and MIT and like all these schools and companies that spin out of those programs to solve some of these problems. But storage that is renewable, because batteries historically, like lead acid, they're just not good for the environment, and there's really no great way to recycle them. So a battery technology that can be generated with very low environmental impact, and also recycled. When that life cycle is over of that battery, what happens to it? Can it get recycled? Can it get put into like a reuse type of situation? So that's really the next step, and getting the cost down. I mean, that you can have the best idea in the world, but until these batteries get to a price point where they make the most sense, in this formula of like with storage or without storage. Is that the question? It won't be a question anymore. It's going to be, yes, storage is part of the system, because now I have my own solar plus storage. And I hate to say it, but like eventually, we may not even need the grid. But it's probably a ways off before that kind of thing would take place, because you really are still very dependent on the utility grid with solar. Make no mistake about it. So, but yeah, that's storage, I would say, especially on a larger scale. You have these giant, and I want to keep rambling here, Dan, and give you a chance to talk too. So like these, it's just you've seen these giant substations, right? You drive by and you're like, wow, it looks like a mess of wires, and it's got a structure, and like there's these things that convert the power from high voltage to medium voltage, and it distributes it in different areas. And that's really all they're doing is these substations take the high voltage from the power plants, and they convert them to a different type of power so that they can travel 200 miles. Then they take it from a smaller substation there, and they distribute it at like a medium voltage. So now the medium voltage actually gets distributed to the homes, to the businesses. So it's like a spider web of utility lines out there. And I guess on the utility scale, that substation has a certain capacity, right? If I'm going to put a giant solar farm next to that substation, can that substation handle the solar? Or should I store the power and just sort of trickle it into the substation from the battery at the rate of power that I can control? Because I can't control the sun and the clouds, right? I'm going to have a spike. I'm going to have a drop whenever the sun comes out, depending on what time of year it is and all that kind of thing. So it's just hard to manage that. So with storage, it solves a lot of those problems. You can actually, on demand, start to distribute your solar power the way you want to. So yeah.
I think it's interesting that we've made all these advances into all these other parts of technology. Moore's law talks about how the technology speed is going to double every 18 months, but we haven't seen that same type of advancement in batteries. And I'm glad to at least hear that we're doing a lot more of this research. And maybe, Elon Musk through Tesla is really pushing that, because a lot of people want a Tesla. A lot of people like that it's American made. Not all of the parts I don't believe are made in America, because, why does he have a factory in China? But, I think I tend to agree with you that batteries and that storage and how we're going to be able to distribute it is going to need to have more investment if we're going to do something with it. So
yeah, 100%. Then there's like these concentrated solar where it's a concave lens, the solar panel, and it can distribute on a solar farm. It can take all of the sun's rays into a focal point. And there's some theories out there that actually it creates more energy that way. So there's things like that too. There's all sorts of research out there right now on how to improve solar, how to improve storage, and it's kind of a fun topic.
It certainly sounds like it. It's certainly giving me a lot more things to think about. Luke, I absolutely appreciate you coming on and talking about solar. Now, here's the part for the show, and this is the part of our social capital that I like to do. It's time to pay Dr. Ford. And what is next for Luke? What is a goal that we can now, the audience and you, can hold you mutually accountable for? So when you hopefully come on next time, we can get an update on the progress to your goal.
Sure. Well, this topic is 100% related to the business I'm in. I mean, that having years of experience in solar, it's helped me. And our business right now it's shifted in strategy a little bit, but I think I will owe it to you and your audience and my audience, frankly, too, just to kind of give an update on, in a year or so, what the path of the industry, what the path of our company looks like, just so we can, yes, we have to be a profitable business. We have to all make a living and all these other things, but we talked about all those environmental impact type things and educating our customers on the products and things like that. Like that really is the focal point of our business. And I want to continue down that path. So yeah, I'll owe you an update. How's that sound?
I think that sounds great. I mean, this as you know, was a part of my progress for what I wanted to do as a goal. I wanted to maintain my social capital. I want to maintain the relationships that I've made over the years, and especially with those friends and colleagues from the Ross Business School, which has been great. Luke, again, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you coming on and talking about this very important topic. And if there's ever something I can do for you in the future, please reach out.
And I respect the hell out of you, man. And I think this podcast is a really cool thing that you're doing. Is it called a podcast? What is it called?
YouTube channel, podcast. I don't know. I'm not that far into the marketing right now. I mean, I need to get 100 subscribers. I'm only at like 64, 65, something like that.
That'll happen.
So I can get a custom link. And what I'm really going to be, I think is going to be interesting if all of a sudden I have to change the name because the custom link is already taken because I can't, I haven't been able to figure that out yet. But,
you're going to have a business on your hands before you know it.
Well, if that happens and there's an alternative source of income, that would be great.
All right. Thanks, Dan. I really appreciate it. Real soon.
Absolutely. Take care, everyone.
Take care.
Awesome.